The intention of this session is to do a deep dive on cross-section plotting. Little word of warning here, the webinar forecast is dry. This is not a flashy, exciting topic, but what I really do want to do is to take you through the basics of how we organized and arranged cross-section plotting, some things that you can show in there that you may not be aware of, some things that are easy to control and difficult to control, but a real sort of walkthrough on the fundamentals of adding bands, annotating, and controlling the main settings. So we will journey into title block setup as well, whatever we can get through in the next 50 minutes, 55 minutes, I'll be heading into. So I do have, I think, two animations to keep things exciting on the slides, but just as a bit of an overview, cross-section plotting, what is it about? It's about publishing either to files or to layouts your cross-sections. We reference in a title block. That essentially is just a drawing file drawn in millimeters. And we have a command where you basically call in the block, which lives in the settings folder, and give it dimensions. And I'll show you how that side works. And the other part of cross-section plotting is you get to pick what cross-sections you do plot. And there's two ways to do that, and I'll talk more about that. One is you take a subset of the design cross-sections, or you write your own cross-sections that you actually want to plot. So I'll take you through that. Just in terms of what happens when you run cross-section plotting, you see this magnificent form on the right, which is resizable. But basically, there are a number of main elements. So right at the top, you set up your plot range. That can be just for display or for publishing. In the midsection is really where the activity happens. What's happening in that midsection about settings and standard bands and annotation is how the cross sections are laid out on a sheet, the title block you use, the scales you have, and the bands of information that you include. And when we say a band, we're actually talking more than a band. We're talking about the band of information down the bottom, which is normally the offset elevation sort of information. We're also talking about the line work and the labeling. So you can toggle on to just show the line work, just show the band, just show the labeling, or a combination of those. And annotation is managing objects you might want to display, pipes, annotating for hatching, for height differentials, some older tools for labeling as well based on offsets and line work. So you'll also see these two buttons, which I definitely need to talk about. They're really important. Load a settings file and save a settings file. All the work you do in setting up your cross-section plots, you really only want to do it once. And we'll talk about those buttons. They basically write out to the settings folder. You'll also see this chainage list. I did sort of say that you can pick and choose which cross sections you actually plot. So that sort of happens there. And then there's two main outputs, either create layouts in the current drawing, which some people love and some people hate, or alternately plot to file. Okay, in which case we create individual drawing files per sheet that you can then XREF across into other drawings. So the animation that I added and forgot about, I should have had that flashing along while I was talking about each topic or each part. If we have a look and talk about the settings, there's sort of two parts in the settings area. So I'm talking about the midsection aspects. The basic settings are really core. They will decide on the general layout of cross sections, the gap between cross sections stacked up into each row, and the gap stacked across into each column. You can manage the datum there, call in the title block, and also set up your section widths. There's also a chainage label control, which is just about the chainage information, pretty basic. The extra settings are pretty cool in that you can, in the layout names, actually set up to send your plot to file to a separate folder. So you're not inside the data folder. You can bring in your own block for the headings if they need to be fancy. You can also have variable section widths. They're the key sort of things out of there that I would get excited about. The title information is also cool, but we'll talk about that as well. You'll see the little flyout there for the basic settings form. That really does expand out and hold the real core information about the layout, the scales, and the widths. So I'm sort of just walking you through the sections. So settings is one part. Another part of sort of creation for how the cross sections all work is this what we call the standard bands, which we should just call bands. A band of information is either and or technical, sorry, band down the bottom of the cross section. So that would be offset level information, for instance. It can also be the line work displaying the shape of terrain, for instance. It can also be labeling. So you may want to label your design codes or put a block and a label up for property boundaries or guardrail. All of those elements make up a band, but you can have different types of bands. So you can have a blank band, which has nothing in it. You can pull up the design cross-section information, that's design codes, design surface. You can pull in any surface you like. You can also leverage the layers tagged objects to basically use a layer of information to document offset information and maybe add a label. So we're going to do that to label up guardrail. I will show you the tagging option because you can actually have a band where maybe you need to name your line marking, L1, L2, L3, for instance. So you can tag polylines and then that information can come across. You will see in other bands some bands. So comment, I think I'm incorrect here. I don't think comment makes an empty band. It's just a comment line in here, but we'll add it and see what it does. The subgrade is a once-off to show the design subgrade sections of the current string. And we'll talk more about current string versus model. And then top bands is really interesting. If you add a top band, then any bands you add underneath that top band entry go above the cross-section window views instead of below. Again, I'm talking a lot, but we'll sort of run all these through. Under annotation is where you can pull in extra objects and add extra annotation information. So hatching, pipes, dimensions. So if you want to show the width of things or slope of things above the section as dimensional labels, you can. Managing the crossfall. So by default, you get the crossfall. Well, normally the default is crossfall once per section, but you might want to add it in every section. There's also other controls around crossfalls, and then there's other labeling tools that you can call in. But the standard bands and the annotation really dominate what you show on each cross section. So I jumped well ahead to the end, but we're not at the end yet. So I'm going to hop across and we're going to start really punching around cross-section plotting. So you're going to start at the basics and just build up all the way through. So we have a design here. We've got a number of roads and we have some models built. So we have a design model and we have total model, right? So you'll all know about total model. Whenever you build roads and network strings, that's curve, returns, cul-de-sacs, knuckles, roundabouts, they'll fall into total model. Okay, so that is a surface. It may be that you actually want to plot, just a surface. You're not interested in design cross sections. But what I do want to show is, I'll focus on this road here called Islet Street. If I open up the cross section viewer, we can see there are design cross sections. So this is the design subgrade. This is the design top surface. This is the existing. Okay, so there are informational things that are useful when we get to plotting cross sections. So to actually plot cross sections, we just right click and we can run plot cross sections from the tool space. It is slightly different if you run it from the tool space to if you run it from the ribbon. So if you run it from the ribbon, what will happen is we'll actually pop up you'll pick a road, but we'll pop a form to ask you where you want to get your cross sections from. So there's lots to talk about, and I sort of will dive deep, but then back out. But right here, you're being asked, do you want to grab sampled sections out of your design, or do you want to grab all the design cross sections? And this button here will allow me to pick and choose out of all the cross sections that are sampled, which ones to include in cross-section plotting. So you see this column here, you shouldn't click on it, but you see that column there. It's really talking about out of all the sections that are sampled, which ones do you want to include in cross-section plotting? So you can specifically get in and untick items in here that you don't want to include. That becomes the selected sampled sections list. Okay, so that's that option there. There is another way to manage the cross-section information, okay, and that's called a section list, named sections list, and we'll talk about that in a moment. When you actually go and open up your cross-section plot, if you've never run it before, if you haven't jigged up your own settings, you'll end up with a style called the base style, standard exect M, and that includes title block, and it includes an arrangement of the cross sections. So getting away from what the cross sections are showing, the title block is here, and then you have a position where you can plot within that title block. And you also have an arrangement of the cross sections. So there is a gap that you can control here, a gap you can control here to manage what's going on in terms of how these cross sections are being spaced out. That actually comes from the basic settings. Okay, so what I might do is back out of here and talk about where the title block comes from. But before I do that, you do need to know how it's called in. So I'll generally overview this and then we'll back out, talk about title block settings and come back here. So in terms of how this is arranged, firstly, we have a dynamic view. So you can basically see what you're going to get. And up the top, you can see that there's a start and an end chainage. You can basically pick the chainage range you want to see. And if you actually want to plot with that, then you can tick this box, right? So you don't have to plot everything. You can pick and choose which cross sections you plot. You set up the range, and then you'll tick this box if you want to plot with that. Okay. The other thing to know is that you can is basically zoom to each sheet, but what's the point? Because you've got a graphical zoom and pan, right? So just so you know that up front. Now you will see the software's arranging in sheets. So that actually comes from the settings area. So I'm going to sort of dive into the settings as a bit of discussion, and then we'll come back out. So I will cut this back and we will certainly create essentially from scratch. But what you should know is that if you like what you've made, you can save it as a style. Now, when you do this, the first thing you should notice is that it goes to your settings folder. Okay, this is the default one, but you could set where your settings live. And all the files that you reference get saved to here and are naturally called out from here. Okay, so if I picked rural, for instance, and I don't want to overwrite, but the other option of saving is loading. So if I loaded a style, let's say I want to go with rural, you'll see that the cross sections look quite different. Okay, so I'm dissolved the bands. I'm saying I don't want bands. I've set a different display style. I've got a vertical line going on, or I don't actually have that, but I could add that. But you can basically really change your look, save it and load it. So just so you can see some of the things you can do. If I went with here, RMS, what does the RMS settings look like? Okay, you can have bands that are quite specific in how they're dimensioned and labeled in the band. Most of the time, most people do the default, which is vertical line and the text just off, but you can create your own style for how you want to label in a band, right? And this is a good example of how that might work. So you can load styles and obviously pre-bake what you've created and rehash them whenever you want. Now, I will make a point here that if you've got a style that you is your default, all you need to do is to overwrite this one. Okay, so when you start a brand new job and it boots up the cross-section plot, or you haven't plotted a road before, It inherits the display out of that style. So if you set up a style that you say is brilliant, perfect for your organization, save it with that name, give it to everybody else, to get them to put in their settings, and that's the default when they, hit plot. Okay, so down here is where you would add information, but I'll talk about that later. And I did talk about changes, so I might go in now. So if this is blank, it's going to use the selected sampled sections list, right? And you'll see that we'll have some sections here, 38.49, which is happening at a TP, right? A turning point between a tangent and a curve. If I go and pick a section list, right, a named sections list, you'll see that that 38 disappears, right? Now, a named sections list is something that's created when the road's created, but you can go and edit it per road. So if I just go and open this up, we're currently showing 10-meter spacings. So this is actually independent of your sampling. Okay, so if I said I wanted along the tangents every 25 meters and along the arcs every 25 meters, and I said update the list, then I've now cut back to 25-meter spacings, right? I could choose a lot more finesse here. So I can individually turn them on and off, but I could choose to include the string information. So I could include tangent to curve, right? Which will flick in when curve tangents happen, right? I could include the vertical information. I could include super. So the name sections list is extremely powerful because you get to really pick what cross sections you want. And that's not about what you've sampled on your string. It will actually just build a cross section wherever you ask to build a cross section. And if you go to extras, then you can go real wild and type in whatever you want. Add that entry. I don't want to pick off screen. It wants me to pick off screen. Okay. So anyway, don't click add entry unless you want to pick off screen. But I've now added one at 12.5. It does not exist in my design, but I can build a cross section wherever I like, right? And that I decided not to show after change 10, so my own punishment there. But we can see that you can really get the sections out. Now, getting to title block and getting to some of the main sort of settings controls. The main settings controls happens under the settings area, right? And I'm going to talk to you about basic settings, then go and talk to you more about the title block, and then we'll come back in and start playing. The basic settings establishes the main arrangement of your cross sections. So if you double click on an entry in here, you can open the entry. If you left click on it, there's an edit button down the bottom as well. What are the basic settings doing? Firstly, horizontal and vertical scale. Secondly, title block. So we're going to come and talk about this next. But the title block is a list with title blocks of your choosing. They're spaced how you want to space them with the information you want. Okay. If you don't want a title block, go with A1 blank page or set up a blank page arrangement. And I'll show you how that would work. The row clearance is the gap between sections, right? Or between rows. So if I make that 25, I'm going to increase the gap between each one. You'll see that these are all staggered. That's the way I like it. But if you went with fixed row spacing, then the row clearance is a fixed distance measured from the datum of one to the bottom of the next. So 20 is not a good idea, right? You'd need, in my case, something like 60. The problem with fixed spacing is obviously if you've got a really high elevation change, they're going to sit over the top of each other. Okay, but if you go with fixed row spacing, the row clearance, I'll just click OK. You'll see that they're now a fixed spacing, so we've now got them lined up in a very organized grid. Okay, the column spacing is the gap between each cross section, so that's along each row. Okay, so that's that there. Interestingly, the left margin and the bottom margin are active, but the right margin, the top margin are not. They actually come currently from the title block settings, but this would allow you to push further to the left. So let's make that 50, and further up from the bottom. So let's make that 30. So what we'll see when we click OK is that these will shift their initial position. Okay. Now the software is thinking about the title block spacing in general to fit itself in. Sometimes you need to shrink that a bit, but the title block actually sets up the plotting area. Okay, so that's why we're not sort of overshooting. Applying a grid is interesting. If you omit the bands, then all the bands disappear. Great for rural. And then show offsets with absolute values will show negatives and positives. Let's just turn it on and have a look. So it didn't really change too much, but you'll see that the negative and positive has disappeared. So it's a bit of a positive negative. So if it's off, it will actually show negatives on the left, and if it's on, well, it's actually true, absolute values. So it shows them as if they're positive. The grid application doesn't appear to do much except put this box here. But there are another place where you can set up grid controls if you want to put a grid on here. If we have a look at datum specification, this is establishing where the datum comes from. So you've got, you can either do it lowest off the natural, lowest off the design, or lowest off either. You can position the datum text on the left or right, and then you've got some offsets and heights. This minimum distance is important. That is a minimum distance from here to the lowest point. And it's about the design surface and the existing, not the subgrade. But in this case, it will be probably that elevation. So if you measured, you probably have 15 units, right? If I make that 30, I'm building in more space. You might want to play with this if you show pipes in here, because we draw the pipes, but we don't update the datum to fit the pipes in. So sometimes you need to come in and change that. The real dangerous one, fixed datum, which would have one datum for all cross sections. Not many people go with that. You'll see this cranking. That distance is being handled by that distance and that distance, right? So it's 5 up to there, 10 from the bottom up to that one. So start a crank, end a crank, distance 1, distance 2. If we look at datum drawing, this is just how the text is displayed for the datum. So I'm not showing it right now, but it's the size of the text, a prefix and a suffix for it, how many decimal places to show. And under widths and text, you can set the width of the cross sections. Now, you can do it globally, or if you untick this, you can do it left and right separately. So I might want to do -15 on the left for the text and the lines. I recommend you keep these together. Text is this information and lines is the rest. I suggest you keep them the same, but you could, get funky and have different left and right side widths. You can use an alignment. I'll show you that later. Some of this I will talk generally about, but not go too deep. The basic line work layer is these lines here. Offset for start end of text from a line is controlling that little offset there. And then offset from top and bottom is controlling that offset there. So if you are not using a style for your text, these controls come into play. For the heading, which we're not seeing, so maybe I'll click OK and have a look at the heading. For the heading, you've got an override, but under the basic settings for the heading, you are establishing the layer, the text style, the size, okay, for the heading itself, and also for this individual text, right? So if you wanted that text bigger, you would change this number here, and that text would grow. Should grow. I'll have another look at where that control comes from.
Shane?
Yeah.
That's the default for when you add a new band.
Okay. There you go. Defaults for adding a new band.
Once you've added a band, it's the individual bands take control.
You got it. Yeah. Beautiful.
Cool. There's another question someone's already asked, and I'm sure you're going to discuss it about the layers that objects use. I thought, given that you already talked about layers, the question specifically about the default settings for the layers, XPlot existing, XPlot designed surface. I think the question is, can I change the colors of those things? And the question really comes down to how the layer management works in cross-section plotting. So do you want to answer that,
So,
Shane?
yeah, I mean, look,
Now's the best time as there to do it.
If you're comparing long section to cross section plotting, in cross section plotting, we are reading the layers out of the drawing. So the only time this becomes an issue is if the layers don't already exist in the drawing. But we read the layers out of the drawing. So there's less of a demand on, pre-setting up a layer list. I think is fair to say. But did you want to add anything to that, Todd?
Yeah, exactly that. It's if you're comparing it to the old cross-section plotting or the long section plotting, and it's a different mechanism in CSD where we actually have a predefined list. Whereas in the cross-section plotting, if the layer already exists when you run the cross-section plotting command, then the software just uses the layer as it is. If the layer doesn't exist, the software creates it, and it creates it as just the standard layer, color and line type and everything that you would get, which is typically white with a continuous line type.
Yeah.
So the question specifically about how to configure xplot existing and xplot design surface, you literally have those layers existing before you run cross-section plotting, and it'll just use the way they are configured. If you wanted to use different layers, then that's where you would do what Shane was talking about at the beginning, where he said that once you set one up the way you like, you save it as a style, you save it over that blah 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 M. I can't remember the name, exec M or something like that, standard M, and then that becomes the default setting moving forward next time you plot. That's pretty much the round trip concept, isn't it, Shane?
That's it.
Cool. The other thing I would also suggest is make sure you get your line type scale set in your drawing correct. Pretty sure the line type scale in the drawing Shane's using is a little up proverbial because it's a mix of imperial and metric line types. But when you get back to your Mollymook subdivision, I'm going to get you to change a line type scale for me and see if it fixes.
Okay.
Um, because that's the other thing it's got to be managed well, and that is your line types for things like perhaps your existing. So if you finish in there, or you,
So
yep,
just so if you want to make your own title block, just create a title block and stick it in the settings folder. So that's what I was doing while Todd was talking.
cool,
And you need to know your bottom left corner that you want to plot and your top right. So you'll see the coordinate tracker down the bottom here,
yeah,
40 to 80,
it's got to
and
be in
then
millimeters and it's got to be in model
804 to
space.
560. Yeah. So that's all I wanted to say about that.
Cool.
But I'll go back to the
Yeah. So see how the green existing surface is really really badly dashed. If you can just type in LTS 0.25 or zero point 0.2 actually, just press enter. 0.2. That's okay. So the cross-section plotting will respect the line type for the line work that you make. So if you want your dash line to be for your existing or something like that, then you just literally set it all up in the drawing before you start, and then you just use those layers, save that style,
yeah,
done. That's
we
the
read
process.
the layers from the drawing.
Yeah,
So
and it's a very long-winded version of the answer, but I think it's actually kind of tied together about three things that I'm expecting to come up as questions. So
oh,
hopefully that answers your question for
thank
you,
you.
Chris.
So under the general tab, you can do two things. One, find out where the settings are and put your title blocks there. And two, run title block setup. So I did talk about, having your own title block. So you can have your own title block, and then your job is to get your position X and Y, 40, 80, and then I probably want to go with, I don't know, I think it was 800 and let's say 570. So you are setting up your title block. This is useful for positioning sheets around each other. So um, you saw in the cross-section plotting, you had these sheets stacked above each other. It will use this to sort of work that side of it out. Also, if you don't want to have one, just grab a blank drawing and you really just want to work in your X and your Y spacings. But you'll see there the graphic for plottable area. So I'm going to go back to my cross-section plots, plot cross sections. And in here, I'm going to go in and change my title block. Right, so I'm going to come in here and grab my SOR title block, and we'll see that it's an awesome title block now. It's got a different spacing arrangement for, how far it can go, the extents, and that's why we're not adding this extra section in here, right? Because we do not have space. Okay, so that's the title block side spoken about. Now, when it comes to the settings, and I'll start there and work my way, continue my way down. Under layout names is where you can establish sheet names of what's produced. Okay, so I want to call this one eyelets. Um, I want to have a suffix of X for whatever reason. I want to start at sheet number 15, and I want to have 2 digits for the sheets. Most importantly here, though, if you're outputting to file, this is where you can pick where those cross sections end up. So you can pick anywhere you like in your computer or on a network of where you want the outputs to go, right? So if I go output here, this is where the outputs are going to go, right? So that's really important to know. You can set that up. The formatting sample line is already on. It says put a sample line under the headings. That's why you've got the green dash and blue line under the settings. This also is where you turn off the bands, omit the heading borders. Enabling overlaps is a dangerous proposition, but it's about, I think, letting the text overlap from memory. The plot direction is up from 0 at the bottom left, but you could reverse the change order in the columns, and you could uh, also make changes in here, right? It's interesting. It talks about aligning the bottom base. That's sort of handled elsewhere as well. Legacy formats you would only turn on if you're trying to do Queensland rural or rural, but they will blow away the bands as well and change that arrangement. You probably want to leave it on use all offsets so that all the offsets that you add in your bands can contribute. I'll talk about that in a moment. So we did change something, and I forget what I changed here, but it obviously made a difference. Reversing the plot order. Huh, interesting. So it stacks from the top down. So your top control would be a lot more important, and your title block setting needs to be a lot better if you're going to reverse the order. The heading widths is really controlling the headings. So very simply, um, you can put the heading on every single cross section. You've got the width of the border, offset for the text, and then a gap between the heading and the actual cross section. So if you want a little box here and a gap, you could have it. In the event that you needed to have a very fancy heading, you could draw your own block for that, and you could call that in instead of using any of the heading controls otherwise. Now, I don't have a good one here to show, so there's nothing good to use as an example, but I'll do something stupid. But if I OK this, what you'll see is it blows away the heading entirely and replaces it with whatever the block is. Okay, so you could make a block with fancy verticals and horizontals, call that in instead of using the defaults. I'll just blank that out because I actually like seeing the normal heading. If we look further down, volume surfaces, I will come back to that. But it's about hatching for that information. Adding a vertical line, we'll just do a vertical line straight through all the cross sections. So there's not much excitement in that, but you'll see a vertical line runs all the way through. The variable section width is actually very cool. So this allows you to manipulate the cross section widths, but in a more sophisticated way than just having a fixed value. So you can do this as an override for the text, the line work and the text separately. On the left, right, I actually want to get whatever the batter width is and add a meter. So if I said batter is less a meter, it's less because it's on the negative, then I can make it push out that far, right? And I could also have a minimum width so they're not too narrow. If you're going to do it to the line work, again, do the same thing to the text. But if I click OK to this, what you'll see on the left is that the cross-section widths are changing based on the edge of the design. Okay, so they'll shrink and they'll widen based on whatever's happening in the design extents. You can also in here call out an alignment, right? So know that you can pull an alignment whenever you like. All right, so I've done very little in a very long amount of time. In terms of the title block information, this isn't quite as useful in the cross-section plot, so I won't really talk about it in any great detail, but I will throw something in so we can see something happen, and then we can argue about its merits. So having done that, I don't really see it. Yeah, I do see it on each cross-section. So or on the bottom left of the first cross section. Okay, so you can add a title block in there, but it sort of positions in that spot. So let's talk about bands. This is probably the sort of key area of what happens in here. We're going to go and add some bands and have a bit of a play. Just in terms of how this design works, I'll just open up a cross section of this. Where's my cross-section viewer? Okay. So I have, variable width. That's cool. That's running off a string. I have a section shape with subgrade. I've got a design cross-section. When I move up into uh, the intersection, let's say, so let's pick here. Whilst the design looks like this, the actual cross-section of the model is quite different. And I can emphasize that. Oh, not today. I can emphasize that by pulling in a surface to show. So I'm going to show, let's go with surface here. Let's show total model. So you'll see in total model, right? We don't have curb there, right? Because we're in the guts of the intersection. We're actually lifting up and then the curb is not even existing at that cross section. We can choose to show that information, but by default, with the bands that I have showing, I'm showing the design cross sections. So you need to understand there are two things you can show: design cross sections or surface information. Um, so I'm going to pull this apart a little bit, but if I go update display, it'll loop me back in. So I have four bands. One of them is just drawing line work. So when you add subgrade band, you are adding just the cross-section shapes from the design string. Okay. So from this one string, I'm showing the cross-section shapes. When you come down to preset bands and you say you want to show an offset, that's what you're showing here. And then you've got existing and design. So I'm going to start deleting these until it tells me I can't delete anymore. And then we're going to add them back one at a time because I want to sort of make sure you understand this part. Okay, so we are showing no bands whatsoever. The only thing we're showing is our subgrade. I'm not going to bother running that because it's boring. You type in your heading and off you go. We're going to add in a band. So you can add in bands for all different purposes. And I would steer away from CSD built models. That's sort of an old way to do it. You could add a band that just reports the codes of your design. You could add a band that reports the design cross sections of the string. You could add in a band that reports the existing surface. You could add in a band that reports the height difference. You could even grab layers of information out of the drawing and use that. Okay. I'm going to add bands just one at a time, and we'll talk about each. So I'm going to add a design surface band. So when you create a band, the interface is the same, right? For pretty much all of the standard bands that we add. And it says here, it's just going to grab the design cross sections. Okay, so this is the design cross sections, not the model, but the design cross sections. You can choose to draw a band down the bottom. You can choose to draw line work at the top and pick what layer that goes on. And you can also decide to draw section labels. Now, this is a bit dangerous because we'll get them at every single point, but we'll leave it on and see what happens. When you add a band, so if I just click OK to this, it'll add, and then we can come back and play with it, although it says no, because I need to add more. Under band controls, you get to set the band height. Now, you can't, you always have to have a height. So if you leave it at 0, it has a default. but otherwise you could set the height of the band. If you don't really want to see a band, you could set the band height at 0.0001. Then you've got a heading, right? Let's call this design sections. Okay. You've got a layer to show that on for the heading. So that's the actual heading. So text is good, and you've got a style and a height. If you want to get fancy with the labels, you can pull in a label style. Okay, and we'll talk about that. I'll show it in a moment. Then you got the text band display. If you're not using a style, you need to have a text height, how many decimal places, um, and those parts. Now, by default, okay, it's still not going to let me out because I've turned on section label styles. You're going to put a border around the heading as well as the data, but you could turn the heading frame off with this. So you could omit the top, the bottom, the left, the right of each of those boxes. If we have a look under offset controls, a really important thing happens here, and I'll come back to this as well. The offsets we're going to be creating offsets wherever we've got our plot status in the cross section to yes. So we're going to create one here, maybe at the back of the curb. We're going to create one at the edge of the footpath, maybe at the outside edge. We'll create one at the batter. So those offsets are coming from this band, right? So down here it says offset controls. Sorry, right here, right at the top, it says add band offsets to what group? Global. So we're going to add these offsets from this band into a group. We're also going to read the offsets from that same group to report into this band. So I know it sounds a bit convoluted, but you put offsets from a band into a group, and then you can separately read offsets from a different group. Okay, so let's say existing surface is perfect, right? We'll bring in the existing surface, but we don't want to add all the grade breaks of the existing surface into the offsets. So we put the existing surface offsets into one group, but we read offsets from another group. I'll show you that. It's probably the most confusing part, but I'll show you that in a bit. I won't worry about the crank settings. I won't worry about filtering, but you can filter, very important for existing ground. Um, and then under section labels, you can label each code. So this is going to label each code. And this comes from a style, right? So I'm going to say, let's give me vertical elevation information. This is using our style editor where you can bring in symbols, lines, and text. I won't say any more than that because I'm already really late in the piece. Um, when you're showing a design, cross-section, or surface, you can basically choose to show crossfalls. So you need to specify heights, how many decimals, what to do if you want to show it one in or percentage, and then if you want to remove trailing zeros. So what we see now is one band. That band is drawing the line work. It's drawing the band down the bottom. The offsets are coming from that band. And this is the label style in play. So at each of those offset points that are relevant, you're also getting label information. Now, if I go back to that band, maybe I don't want those labels, so I can turn them off. Hit apply, they're not there, right? If I go back to section labels, I did say I wanted to see the crossfalls, but obviously I put them on a layer that it's not showing. So I put them on layer 0, they show. Now, by default, the crossfalls show wherever they change and once per page, but I'll show you where you can change that. The offset controls are not really helpful to you here, but if I said let's report the offsets from this group called group 1, we'll actually get no labels. Why? Because we added the labels to a group called global, but we're reporting the offsets from a group called group 1. So this is how you can add have extra information, but not included in your labels. Now, offset filtering doesn't apply for design surface, but let's add the existing ground. There's two ways to do it. You can choose existing surface, or you can choose surfaces. The good thing about existing surface is it's your sampled surface. And the good thing about surfaces is it's a named surface that you can change. But if we go existing surface, let's add this. So I'm going to add this real quick. I'm going to leave the name as is. If I pick label styles for the band display, I might want to do middle with top pick. And again, this is managed through um, a label style. But if I OK this, I've now got my existing ground, and that has a very different band presentation. But have a look at all those extra grade breaks I'm getting. I'm getting all this extra noise. And the reason is because of that offset control. So I'm saying stick those offsets into the global group along with the design ones because they're all in the same group. And then I'm saying report the same group. Now, if I wanted to see just the offsets of the existing ground reported in this band, I could put the offsets of the existing ground into this group called group one. If I click apply right now, I'll only get existing ground information where the offsets of the design are. But if I said, show me the offsets of the existing ground uh, as reported items, these are the offsets coming off the existing ground grade breaks. Okay, so this is how you could have differential offsets showing per band. Now, you will see that this ground is fairly flat. If I wanted to, I could apply filtering. So I could say, look, if you don't have a grade break of 2%, don't include it. See how you get less here because we're filtering out the ones based on grade break of the top surface. We could do it based on height difference. Height from one grade break to the next is less than 0.1. Pull them out. Okay. If you do a minimum offset, don't come more than 100 mil to each other. Right? I'm not filtering much there. Let's say don't come more than a meter apart. So you can choose to apply filtering based on all these rules. The chord height difference is actually very cool. It's a combination of the grade break and the height difference. Basically, between each two segments, it draws a straight line, measures the height across the segment or the two segments. But if I apply that, then I'll get a sort of a smart filtering where it's finding just where the grade breaks are most dominant. Okay. I really don't want the existing ground to be included, so I'm going to add the offsets to group one, but I'm going to report offsets of global. Okay, so then I'll match up with design. So hopefully that tells a bit of a story about that control for offset filtering because it's really important. Let's add some other types of bands. The offset band is pretty basic. There's no point drawing the band. There's nothing to draw. The offsets are the offsets, so the offset controls are not all that useful either. Those are ordered, and if you use the up-down arrow, you can reorder the bands, however you want to order them. Now we're going to add some bands that you may not have played with before. So design codes will add a band documenting the codes. Okay, so I'm just going to let it rock and roll, and then we'll come back and play with it. But you'll see now that each design code is labeled. If I come back in here, I might want to make the band narrower. I might not want to see the vertical line here, right? So if I come into override borderline display, I want the bottom of the band, the left and the right bits, but I don't want the top. So now if I hit apply, you'll see that it does not draw that top band line. Okay. If I didn't want to draw the bottom, I could do that as well. It won't do much, but if I stack two bands on top, oh yes, it did. But you can basically trim out your borders this way. If I went to section labels and turn on section labels, then maybe I'd turn the band off and I could put the labels on each code, right? So you would need to pick something that's reporting the code, which I don't have, so I won't get much. But I could add a label that reports the code, okay? And then I'd be reporting, code or tag. There we go. So then we'll see I'm now reporting the code up on the actual band, right? So good things to know. That's an option for you, right? So let's just okay that. If I drop this down, height difference. So the cool thing about this is you can go in and configure this band. So some of the bands allow you to configure, And it's important you do because what you want to do is to pick the two surfaces you want to show, compare. So you can pick any two surfaces. So instead of picking design and existing, I'm going to pick the total model and existing ground, right? You got unit control, you got show absolute values, so it doesn't show the plus and the minus. Uh, so when I go okay to that, I will draw the band absolutely. Drawing the section line is not all that useful. I could, presumably add section labels, but normally wouldn't in this case. But I now have a height difference going on between not design and existing, but actually the total model and existing. So that raises a really interesting point, right? Which we need to talk about. So around this chainage, which is chainage 282, I'm at an intersection, right? So if we go and have a look at our cross sections at chainage 282, so let's make this 290, 300. So if I have a look around chainage 300, what you will see is that you're not noticing that there's actually an intersection here, right? Um, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the design surface. I'm just going to come in here and disable it, essentially. And then what I'm going to do is yeah, probably shouldn't have disabled it. It's okay. It just shifted them around. I'm going to instead pull in a surface. So when you use the surface option, it's perfect for surfaces you've designed with Model Builder, and it's perfect for any other surface. So any Civil 3D surface can be shown. So if you made a stockpile in Civil 3D, you could show that absolutely here. But I'm going to pull in total model and show that. And I'm going to show that with XPlot design. Um, if I go into band controls, I've got a name and whatnot. In the offset controls, I can actually filter this because it's a surface, right? And this is where you might want to do chord height difference because you're really just reading the triangles. And I will actually do that. I'm going to add a chord height difference of 0.1. Um, let's say it's 0.01. Um, so when I then go to section labels, I do want to show the crossfalls, and there's an extra option in here. So just got to take note of this. You will see in here that you can choose how to label off a design surface. So you can tell the software to label the midpoint between all grade breaks, the midpoint between codes. So it only finds the codes off your section, off your model, and labels between those, or an average slope, which is a really weird one. I don't normally show it because it's a bit unusual. Most people don't really want it. But here you can choose the plot status of the code. So the backer curve is set to no, right? So if I say if either code plots yes, if that code is no and the next code is no, then I won't get a label there, right? But if I click OK to this, the most important thing to see here is that when we get to 290, have a bit of a look at it. Yeah, 290. You can see the subgrade doesn't catch up with us, but you can see that the curve is right here, and the software is now, documenting out the codes, the crossfalls, and documenting out the offsets. Now, there's too many offsets, so if I go into total model, I could tweak with the offset controls here. Let's go to 0.1 and apply, and then I'll get a more sensible deliberation of this. Let's make it 0.2, apply. So I can start limiting the controls here based on different rules and start applying filtering. Now my problem is I'm also getting back a curve, not from um, this work, but actually from the design band, right? So this is where adding myself into global is actually annoying to me. So I'm going to set this to add to group one and show group one. So I'll only show the offsets that are coming from this band, and then I can sort of see what sort of filtering I'm achieving, right? Um, So you can use this to your advantage to basically pick and choose where you want your offset information. I'll set this to global again, and we'll come back to that. In terms of the labeling, I might show you the average slope or default. So you can sort of start limiting this out. It's not a perfect mix, but you can, start getting a good sort of look and feel out of this. If I go and just delete the design surface here, I'll get rid of the offsets coming out of design. So these are just the offsets from the model, which is actually looking pretty heavy. Let's just go into total model here. I'll just change this up to 1. It's not actually cutting as many out as I
Is it
thought
the
it would.
offset band
The offset band shouldn't play a factor.
or the
Uh,
height difference?
height difference.
What's it set to for offsets? Is it adding to the global group? No, you don't want to use the
We
offsets, but is
don't.
it automatically adding to the global group in the offset tab? You were there.
I'll go and filter it, but I don't think it is.
Just take it out. Just go offsets and just add the bit at the top. Change it to add to nothing.
I add it to global group 1.
You just put it on the blank line. Here's another trick I use: is you just put it on the blank line and it just turns it off.
Yeah, no, it
Okay, it's
does
not
look
that
like
one.
it's coming from this. Just normally chord height difference is the bomb. Let's make this 5.
No.
Not making much difference. No, interesting. Well, let's check if this is the culprit, right? We'll put this in group 2.
It is.
It is, but where do these offsets come from? Those offsets are coming from. Dun, 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 dun. We got rid of design.
Codes. What's code set to do?
Ah, codes. It will be too. Let's
Because
let's.
codes will be coming from the.
Mm,
Now
yeah,
they're all shrunk.
now it'll shrunk. So anyway, lots of places where you can get controls. You can
I,
set
I
it
I think the
using.
message to everybody here is be careful which ones you change because if you add them to all, it can
Yeah,
be one of the four that you've added. And yeah, anyway,
yeah, and you get more than you
there it
expect.
is. That's what we wanted.
That's what we wanted. Okay, so height difference we talked about. If we just have a look very quickly at layers tagged objects, I only spend a minute on this. Um, I'm going to draw stuff on a layer called guardrail, right? So I'm going to draw some polylines, maybe some lines around the place. I'm just going to draw. I need some guardrail here. I need some guardrail here. I need some guardrail here. Right in the footpath because that's the way I roll. So if I add uh, layers tagged objects entry, then I can pull that layer in. Okay, so I'm going to do that. So when you add a layers tagged objects, you basically tagging is interesting. I've run out of time already, but we can talk about that in another session. But I'm going to pull just this layer and add it, and then I'm going to say, look, 15 meters left and 15 meters to the right. I want the 2D information of that, but what I want to do is just jam it on a surface. So I want to stick it on the design surface if I can, but if that's not there, stick it on the existing. Right. So the rest of this I won't worry too much about. I want it to add the offsets for where those turn up. I don't really need it in a band, so I'll come turn that off. But the most important thing is I want to label it, right? So I turn on the section labels, and I'm going to put in I don't know, do I have a guardrail here? I do. Flex fence guardrail, right? So when I have a look at, what's it asking me for label style? I don't really need, well, I didn't need to do the band. So when we have a look at this, if I go and have a look down at the start, I should find wherever that layer has turned up, I now have a label. And I could annotate that with elevation offset, but it is picking up the offset and documenting that. Okay, so you can use this with multiple layers and pull it in and show left and right. I'm not getting the left side because I don't have the offset in place, so it's doing the right thing, not showing me what it can't show me. But this is a great tool to show information. You can tag objects, as I said before, and you could put that information in a band. So there is a command up here in cross-section plotting called tag objects. And if I pick this object, I could tag it. I could call it G1, right? So you can start naming these and you can include that name in your band, right? So I've now tagged that. And if I go and edit this entry and I say, I've already configured it to pull in the layer that's got the tag on it. But you'll see you can just grab tagged items, which is cool. But if I go into the band controls, let's turn on the band. If I was to say, show me a band that documents the tag, then what I will see is a band. I'll just find where there's some guardrail. So it's not saying what it should say there. Let's just change this to layers and tagged objects, tags and layers. I don't need to pick that. Oi, don't tell me that. Let's go apply. So you'll see now I've got a named entity control. Okay, that name could go above the object, right, instead of in a band. Okay, let me just quickly flesh out other controls in here. So under annotation, well, I will do something. Let's say you want a G1 at the top. If I went top bands, so when adding a top row band, you can do a fixed height from this datum point or a fixed height from the highest elevation in the line work. But let's just go fixed height of 40. And we'll also add leaders from the top down, so we'll have the line work matching up with these offsets. So what happens out of this is that nothing appears to be the case, but any band below top items will go above the lower bands or above this display. So let me do that. But what you will see is that that won't appear to work, and there's sort of no gap here. And the reason for that is because you need to turn off fixed row spacing. So if you turn off fixed row spacing and you put in a row clearance, this row clearance will be the fixed gap between each row, even though that's unticked. But having unticked that, we'll now see that that top row will go above and there's the 25 height. So if you're interested in having a top band, that's easy to add. You add a top row, top items follow entry, and then make sure you don't have fixed row spacing on. I'm just going to unwind all that, and then we'll continue on. Just looking at annotation controls, right? So some of these are sort of replaceable. So add symbols from code could be replaced with the layer option. But what this does, it allows you to, and I'll just pick guardrail, for instance, allows you to pick a change range, allows you to set a scale and an offset, but basically you're offsetting from a code. So I'm going to go zero point 0.5 off the left back a curb, and what I want to do is to throw in a guardrail, right? So I'm going to put in, or a light pole, right? And I'll make it, I think a negative is going to work better. So you can basically pick a code and jam on a block of your choosing, right? So it's actually good if you wanted to, sketch out your guardrail. It's obviously a dumb block to use, Shane, but the point's made. With regards to crossfalls, you're getting crossfall once per section and where they change. But if you go to the crossfalls tab, you could say to show crossfalls on every cross section, even if they don't change. That is an entry. Crossfall label adjustments is if crossfalls are overlapping, you can allow them to overlap or try and make them fit in by shrinking them. if you wanted to add dimension labels on here, it is a style, so I don't have time to talk about the style setup. But basically, what you can do is pick codes and add labeling um, as dimensioning. You can also show slope in there as well, right? But yeah, the control to do it is not here. There's another form to do that. If I have a look further down, hatching is a good one. You can hatch any two surfaces. So you can hatch between, let's say, total model and existing. And then we can pick the pattern, the scale, and the layer. The pattern, the scale, and the layer. So I'm going quite random on my layers, so I have no idea what I'm going to get. But you can see now you've got cut and fill, hatching. Let's find a place where we've got some fill going on or cut. Okay, if I have a look further down, line label from offsets is sort of a legacy item. Some people love it, use it. Basically, you can uh, add a boundary line marker based on a code or a distance or an alignment. Um, I would actually use the layer line options, the same as I did the guardrail. I would use that to do the property boundaries, but you can walk through all of this to add some stuff. I know I'm well and truly above time, and the other one that's there that's sort of a more historic item is line offset from layer, which is quite similar. Pipes is really important to know. I don't have pipes in, or do I have pipes in this job? We'll see. Um, you basically can pull in the pipes. There are some limited label controls here, so you'd have to play with these to see which ones you like and which ones you don't like. But this is an opportunity to pull in pipes. Now, they'll show as a circle if they cross up to a certain angle. If the angle's quite obtuse, they'll show as a line. Lo and behold, I created no drainage pipes or sewer pipes or service obstruction pipes, so can't see those. But they will show. Specify offsets will add just strictly offsets at particular, sorry, band information at particular offsets. So if I just do this 0 to 100, let's add an offset of 1 meter here, make it active. So all it does is thrusts in an offset uh, label at a particular offset value. So look, I guess I should uh, park it there. Definitely save your style once you've made something you like. And Todd, as I said and Todd reinforced, if you overwrite that one, that's the default for the futures. So that was a sort of real punch in the face on um, adding and building cross sections plotting. If we plot to file and plot to layout, have to finish. So plot to file will create layouts. Now, because I said to prompt, every time it'll ask me to confirm. So it's great if I know I want to change the name every time. But what this will do is it will basically create the layout tabs with the naming convention that I've asked for. Okay. Obviously, I should get rid of my last cross section because the design's out of whack there. Um, if I run plot to file, then I'll just get external files created. Okay. But they'll be created in that folder that I asked for. Okay. So they won't be in with the data folder. They'll be in that other folder location. Right. So if I go to here, let me just find out my outputs. There we go. So it wrote to the desktop, not to my data folder, to my folder that I'd asked for.